Hey, welcome everybody to another version of JourneyCast here at Scalibrium. I'm your host, Rob Swymer, and wow, do we have an episode today. I have been looking forward to this for a long time. Look at him smiling already. This is my good friend, Gary Harris. Gary, you and I go back a long way, man.
A long way, brother. Long way.
Long way. So good to see you, brother, and I know all about you, of course, but please, before we get started and start the episode, give me an idea, give the listeners an idea, a little bit about you and where you are today and some of the roles that you've had, and then we'll kick it off with some lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, congratulations on your book. Not only have I read it, but I've given it to 4 family members, and very inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I was born in a real small town in Connecticut, and a farming town. Not everybody that lives there is named Biffy or Chip or whatever. Found my way in California many years ago, which is where I started my career. Going back to 1989, back my first gig out of college was starting my own construction company, where my first job out of college was working as a laborer.
Right.
And I'll never forget the first day, because I got done with my work, and all the guys that worked at this particular contractor were laughing at me because my hands were raw and bloody. And so because I didn't bring gloves, because I was an idiot back then. But I started my sales career shortly thereafter at Kodak, and I worked for companies like, Kodak Datascope, which is a cardiac monitoring company. Then I got into parametric technology, which is where I learned about Medic. Then went to work for companies like HP and Splunk, where you and I had glorious careers. And now I'm working at Databricks as a first-line leader. So most of my roles up until 2016 were individual contributor, and finally got into the world of sales leadership, which I love. And that's where I'm at today.
Awesome. Today is an interesting subject. We at JourneyCast, we're really focusing on the entire aspect of sales. We're also focused on the mindset of go-to-market executives and sales leaders and salespeople, individual contributors, but the entire go-to-market ecosystem, if you will, right? We used to call it the family back in the day. And this is really all about sort of how can we help these people that are listening now. And the listeners can be individual, they can be leaders, they can be customer success, they can be professional services. We're here to serve all go-to-market executives and get them the competitive edge they need. And I can't think of a better subject, and this is going to be a surprise for everybody, a better subject than failure, to really hit this home. Because look, failure is part of life, and I can't wait to talk this about you, because you and I we've all had our trials and our adversity, and in fact, everybody does. Everybody's got a story, right? And so today, the topic is really about failure and how it shaped not only you and myself, but how it shapes everybody we come in contact with, right? So
Absolutely.
right. And I think I've said this. I know I've said this, and I don't know if I've said it on JourneyCast, but I say it every time I get the opportunity on the stage. I used to say that I struggled, right, with X. I struggled with Y, and now I've changed that mindset and that language to I'm in transformation, right? And we're all learners. We're all lifelong learners. So I don't struggle with anything these days. I am in transformation with some things. And I think and that's a mindset. I know you're going to talk about that for failure.
Yeah.
And before I get into that, I want to ask you sort of a setup question that I ask every guest, and that is, how has failure impacted your life?
Yeah, I mean, I always have a couple of lines from, famous people. I think Albert Einstein was the person that said that adversity defines one's character. You can change adversity to failure.
Yeah.
I was just at an exhibit with my daughter, Vincent Van Gogh, and it said, success is an outcome of a whole string of failures. I mean, those are 2 quotes right there that really, really define me and my life, essentially from a young boy to where I am today. So, failure is something that just fires me up. I'm not going to tell you I love to fail, because I'd rather succeed, but failure teaches me. I learn from failure, and I've learned so many things from it in my life. I mean, I give you examples of, you know, and I don't mind being very open about this because, you know, I'm too old to lie about stuff anymore. But, you know, I flunked out of college. I went to the United States Merchant Marine Academy, one of the 5 federal academies, and flunked out of college. You know, I had a succession of jobs from August of 2001 in New York City. We all know what happened in September 2001.
Yeah.
Where I went from job to job to job to job every 6 months. And in between, I worked as a bouncer. And, you know, a bunch of failures in there. In fact, one hiring manager looked at me and said, "You got a bunch of turds on your resume." And I just cracked up. I go, "You call them turds, but there's gold in those turds." And I ended up getting the job and being one of their most successful salespeople at the time. So, you know, there's just a couple of examples of failure and how it's impacted my life, but really it's helped drive me to where I am today.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I remember my dad, and when I was a kid, he'd always say adversity builds character. He'd say that all the time. And you know, I'd look up at him and I'd say, "Well, how much character do I have to have here, Dad?"
Yeah, my dad actually responded to me because he was the guy that said that quote to me. He's a Navy guy, and you know, he told me I was building a lot of character because of all the failure.
There you go. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And then people forget that through failure comes learning, and you get to a next level. And really, failure, adversity, however we want to talk about this, but you know, you remember that famous Tiger Woods Nike commercial when the ball was going in and it was just the Nike logo, and then it dropped on the turn, amen corner. What a lot of people don't know is the shot before that, he shanked in the rough.
Yeah,
that's why he was there in the first place, and he hit one of the worst shots of his day, and then here we go with the best shot. That's a iconic moment in sports right after that. So learning from that failure is so important.
Absolutely.
For me, it's, you know, I want to dig into sort of what are the things you've learned through your failures, and you know, what are the lessons that you want to pass on to those listening that are going through some things now. I mean, the way the world is now and the way the business world is now, they're really intersecting. And there's a lot of people that are struggling, right, Gary? There's a lot of people that are sort of trying to figure things out, if you will. So, you know, what are some of the things that you use to sort of raise yourself up after failure? Some of the tricks that you've used, or the brain hacks that you've used, or what do you do to get up from failure?
Yeah, I mean, after a failure experience, and like I said, I've had quite a few, from early stages of being a little boy and not listening to my mother about crossing the street and end up getting hit by a motorcycle and almost killed. My leg got caught in the back of the motorcycle, and the guy kept going, tried to do a hit and run, and dragged me up the street. You know, to simple examples of not making the captain of the football team, or, as I mentioned, flunking out of college, or living with a friend who, you know, was destructive to himself and had an addiction and also was a drug dealer many years ago. Even making decisions on my own of, you know, getting myself arrested for doing something really stupid. You know, there's all kinds of examples of that. And I even mentioned the one where I was studying Japanese in college, and I was planning to go to Japan and teach English and live there for a couple of years. And there was nobody else competing against me for this program at San Francisco State until like the week before. And apparently they based the grade point average as the milestone based on grade point average. And this guy had 0.3 grade point average better than me and got it. And I considered that a failure because I didn't know what to do. And I was very down and depressed at the time. Wish I would have read your book. You know, I even started my own construction company when I got out of college, and lost $100,000 of somebody's money because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So there have been a lot of failures in my life, but I live by the motto that you got to just get up. If you're not failing, you're not trying. You're not going out there and taking the steps and trying something.
Yeah.
And I've tried a lot of things in my life. I often talk about with my daughters about when they're in sports, how the coaches are looking at you. And I was a coach as well. And, I ranked players based on skill, will, and attitude. And some players don't have the best skill. They're average, but skill can be taught with hard work. Maybe they're not naturals, but they can be taught to be competitive. Yeah. The will and the attitude is something that's really interesting. And I'm going to give you a quick story. This is a little bit off topic, but if you look at my youngest daughter, her name's Grace, and she's 9 years old, and she tried out for club soccer 3 years in a row and didn't make it. And if you were to rank this girl on skill, will, and attitude, you'd say skill, average. But will and attitude were way up here. I mean, my little girl speaks French. She plays pianos and recitals.
Wow.
She's in multiple sports. She's an excellent lacrosse player.
Yeah.
Started softball and made the team and immediately started hitting the ball and was learning the game. But soccer was her nemesis.
Wow.
And finally, they opened up another team and she got on the team.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with the coach about 2.5 months after she started. And I gave him that whole thing about how I rank kids, skill, will, and attitude.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he said, Gary, not only does your daughter have great attitude and great will, like way above everybody else.
Yeah.
She's the best player on my team. And 3 weeks later, she was named captain of the team.
Oh.
So great story of my child facing adversity and me coaching her through that.
And you watched that. And because of your failure, you were able to mentor her as your daughter. What a great story.
It is a great story. And I do that. There's multiples of those stories of my kids, as well as the sales team. Not sure I answered your question though.
No, you did. No, you're good. Look at this is all, we're just, like we said at the beginning, we're two guys that are talking about what we've learned from our failures and how we've turned those lessons learned into some behavior for the people around us, whether they be family or friends, or let's go into the business world, right? So
yeah.
So Gary, we've been talking a lot about the personal trials and tribulations, the personal adversity, and you know that I speak about how we transform that into the business world. How do we leverage those skills that we've learned, those lessons that we've learned, and take that to the business world, to people that work for us, that work around us, that we work for. I'm curious to see your stance on that, and how you leverage all that you've learned from the adversity in your life. How do you bring that to the business world?
Yeah. So, again, business is personal. I think you'll agree to that.
Yeah.
If you look back at the fact that our income's dictated as salespeople by, our strategy, some good luck, diligence and so forth. It's the good luck part you can't really control. That's either going to happen or it's not going to happen. Right. There's good timing, there's bad timing. And I recall as an IC, there was years that I would struggle because the economy wasn't good and people were cutting costs and things like that. And I wasn't selling a product that really or a solution that would really help them, solve the cost problem. And so it was tough. And then there were other times like my year 2019 where I closed a massive deal and became number one salesperson. But that journey, for example, started 5 years prior to that.
Sure.
And it was bit by bit. It was addressing the issue at hand at this one account where they were trying to kick us out. They were doing maybe a couple $100,000 of our business, to getting them to do the next first deal in trust, right? And trusted me and my company and the technology. The
Big
second
word.
deal, then going massive, with a goal.
Yeah.
So how do I well, let me answer your question very directly and short. I probably don't need to expound on it, but you do it through action. People see how you manage failure and adversity.
Right.
And it is I'm trying to think of the word for it, but it's catchy, right?
Yeah.
It's contagious. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah. Contagious. Yep.
And they look at you and see what you do. And when sometimes you do these things, you don't think people are looking, but they are, and they see it, right?
Yeah.
And you know it's the right way to manage it. There have been tough times that I've gone through that as a leader, not just as an IC, but as a leader, where I can't express myself with all the negativity and everything else, because that doesn't do anybody any good. What I try to do is figure out what's positive out of this and how do I turn this around. And again, I really simply said it's about action.
Yeah.
People will look at you as a leader and they will follow your lead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the measure of a man really is not how he holds himself up when he's successful. It's the measure of a man is how he holds himself up when he fails. And
I knew you'd come up with a great quote.
Well, it's just I just think that that's everything, and I think it's, I say it all the time. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not have all the answers. And what that does is it puts you into a place where you build trust because you're vulnerable and you're authentic with it. And building trust helps you actually fail faster. It helps you get up faster because then you have your support system around you. Because no matter how good you are at getting back afterwards, you certainly need people around you. I would not be 31 years sober today if I didn't have the program and the people around me to help me, right? That's a given, right? I mean, you can't do it, right? You can't. And when you look at business, you're going to fail, and you have to have people that are able to rise you up after that and pick up, dust you off, and then say, yeah, you got this, right? You got this. And, we forget about that. We talk about failure, we talk about adversity, and we talk about overcoming that. But I think we also have to be mindful of the people around us that help us do that. I'd love to have a story or anything you can kind of come up with in your business world where, you had a failure, but, you looked around and you had so many people boosting you up, right? That you just failed so fast. You got back up and then you persevered and turned it around, and it became one of the best stories, right? I mean, that's what it's all about. The rise of the hero is the best story you can tell. Right? And so do you have anything that you can share with the listeners about how that group around you, that family, that the people that worked with you raised you up and brought you to a new level after failure?
Oh, absolutely. There have been too many to count. Accounts, but one that just came to mind, which it literally just came to mind. So see how this comes out. But it was a pharmaceutical company I was working with here. And we were going down the path. There were several failures in between where we were going down the path of probably losing some of our business to a competitor. And I had a whole team of what we call RSAs, DSAs, SAs, field marketing folks, including some of the leadership here at the company, all gathering together on a regular cadence. And that's one of the things that we did is said, hey, we're failing here. And let's get together at a regular cadence. And I want everybody, no egos, throw the egos at the door. I want everybody to talk about what they learned this week. I had people that were doing implementations. I had people that were helping the customer with education and learning. I had people that were talking to other executives there. One of them who was going with our competitor's solution. And she was very difficult. All of us got together and talked about it and put all the egos and said, okay, what do we need to do from here? We agreed on what we needed to do at that point, and each week we took incremental iterative steps. And long story short, you mentioned it takes a village. I'm not a big fan of that term. I think it's overused, but it does take a village.
Sure.
And it took an entire team to figure out where we were failing, why we were failing, and how do we resolve it for the customer. And when we did, we ended up getting a massive deal from them in the large $20 million figure, because we rebuilt the trust, showed them the value of the solution that we're talking about. You know, Doug May. Doug May always talks about business value, and he was a big part of that.
Yeah.
This was, by the way, mind you, during COVID.
Yeah.
When COVID started. And we all came together, and it was a team win. If there ever was a team win, that was it.
And that's so sweet, right? When everybody gets together and charges up that hill together, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the cool part about it. I love that. That's a great story. Thank you.
And the honesty. I mean, there was honest moments with everybody where people were, in the past, maybe they were afraid to say, hey, I made a mistake. And we all were making mistakes. And so being honest about it, we're like, hey, I made this mistake. How do we fix that? And everybody would chime in. And like I said, we went from being at risk to doing a very large deal with this customer, which set part of the pace of this company going forward to where it is today.
That's cool. That's very cool. I love that story. And thanks for sharing with the audience that story, because I think it's, it's honest, it's authentic, and that's what we're trying to get. So people are listening to this, they may be going through something like this now, and you have to know that this is just part of life in business now, and you've got to be able to get back up again.
I'd like to give you another example, although it wasn't really part of the question, another example of failure that I think is relevant.
Yeah, go
ahead. We've all done this. I was working at a small startup. The company was called Inquira. They no longer exist. They got bought by Oracle. But I was working at this company in New York, and I covered an account that was in Kentucky, and I had built a great relationship and built a champion. And we all know about champions. I know it's not the topic today, but I built a great champion. We had
Palladino on for champions, so we've done that.
Boy.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So that was a good one. That was a good episode. But I had a great relationship going. And then one day my boss asked me to do something, and I was in such a haste that I typed a message back to him, basically saying something derogatory about this person. Except I sent it to this person. And my heart sank, because there was no way. This was back in 2003. There was no way to bring your email back or whatever. And I knew immediately. It was $1 million opportunity, and probably one of my first at the time. And there's several ways you can react to that. That's a failure. That's a failure right there. I was too fast. I was running too fast. I wasn't paying attention, and I did something that not only impacted me, but my entire team and my company, because we were a young startup at the time. So what do you do? In my case, I went and called her. She didn't answer. Called her again. She didn't answer. I emailed her. She didn't answer. I flew out there, and I waited for her. And she came out. Now in this day and age, I probably was considered a stalker, but I approached her. I said, "Can you give me 5 minutes?" She said, "Yes." And I was honest with her. I made a mistake. But some of the things that you had said, made me have that reaction, and I wanted to share it with my boss. And I deeply regret that I shared it with you. I'm sure you had a few comments about me. I was trying to bring her back to the humanity of it. And she said, "Okay, I accept your apology." I flew back home. We ended up closing a deal with her later. She accepted my apology, but I lost that relationship. But I at least saved the business for the company and got her the value that her company needed. So I'm okay falling on my sword.
Yeah.
I made a mistake. I own it. And if you look at Jocko Willick's book, Extreme Ownership, talks a lot about owning up to your mistakes.
Yeah.
I did one recently at work here as a leader, where I was told, or I was given a directive to do something. I was too busy, frustrated with the changes and so forth, that I allowed that to get in my way. And a half a year goes by, and the rankings came out amongst all the teams, and my ranking was the lowest in the country based on this one activity. And I'm a big guy. When I talk to my team, I talk a lot about brand. I'll always promote the brand of the company, the brand of the team, and the brand of the individual. And right now, my team's brand was hurting because of me, because of my failure. And so I took charge. I admitted to my management, my leadership, it was my mistake, my fault, but I'm going to fix it. 3 weeks later, it's fixed. So, owning up to your failures, regardless of how difficult and uncomfortable that was, either one of those situations, is super important.
I love that. The vulnerability is really cool here, and I think that people listening, I know they're listening, and they're, I'm sure somebody might have done that same thing, or we've all hit send when we shouldn't have, and we've all said things in email that we wish we could take back, or text that we wish we could take back, and it's you said at the beginning of this segment, you said business is personal, and I say it the same. I say the same thing. I say it's a spiritual game, which means it is between two people always. It's between people
Absolutely.
and humans. It's a human connection, right? And I think it's really important that we, I fall on the sword, I get, but the reality is what you did was you were honest and open, and you were real. And that, like you said, that relationship is going to be hard to get. It would be hard to get that back after you did that. But the reality is you were, in that example, what I took away from that, and here's listeners, listen up on this, is that it's not about you, it's for the greater good. So, and that's the key here. So even if you are, you have done something to, not have a good relationship with a customer, that's okay. I mean, it's happened to me where I didn't get along with the person. And you know what I did? I went to my manager and I said, can you reassign this account to somebody else? Because I know they can use the product. I know we can bring value, but I'm just not the right guy for it. There's just something I'm not comfortable with. There's a rub there with the champion, and I just don't want it to go sour. That's okay. And it's not a bad thing to do that. And, I'm a firm believer, and it happened many, many times, is that the universe is going to bring it back to you. The universe is going to bring it back to you tenfold. And I've lived and breathed that, so I know. And I know
Sounds
you're
a
the
lot
type
like
of guy.
karma and servant leadership.
It really does, doesn't it? It really does. That's awesome. I want to keep the stories going. So I know you as a guy that you're in the Diamond Club with me in past companies, and you've done club after club after club. I've seen you in every arena, but I know that road, wasn't a straight road. And you've said you have told some stories. I want you to continue on the stories of how you failed early as a seller. You talked about your personal life and the construction and all that. When you got into the software business and you started with PTC and all those things that you did, and through the years, say the last 20 years or so, as an early seller, what are some of the ways you failed there and that you learned from?
Yeah. So I have a few stories. These will sort of sum up into one area that we can talk about. One time when I was selling cardiac monitors for a company called Datascope, they were one of the first cardiac monitoring companies out there. You'd sell to surgeries and ERs and things like that. And you had to be pretty bold. I remember my first day, my boss said, follow me. We grabbed a monitor and walked right into the ER and right through the doors. There's trauma cases going on. And I'm like, hey, where's the director of nursing? It was a tough job. But when you finally got an opportunity, it was super important. And meaning that, you didn't get that many opportunities, but somebody looked at you and said, okay, I'll give you a shot. And one time I was in a hospital in San Antonio, and it was a heart hospital, and we had hooked up the patient to the heart monitor and a mass spectrometer anesthesia system, which is basically a system plugged into the wall. And I was super excited that I was there, and I'm watching a case. It wasn't a deep heart case, but it was a case that was exciting. And the doctor, the anesthesiologist, asked me a question. And I was so focused on the case that when he asked me, I'm like, yeah. And I ran over there to respond to him, which is only about a section of 4 feet. I tripped over the mass spectrometer wires, tripped over my monitor wires, was laying on the floor The monitor is now unplugged. The
Yeah.
anesthesia is no longer going to the patient. So the patient's not being anesthetized and the patient's not being monitored. And I look up at the doctor, and this all happened really quick. And I just looked at him. I said, I'm not getting the sale, am I? And he goes, no, you're not. And he gave me a few curse words, told me to get everything back up and running, which I did. It's a great example of a sales guy who was not paying attention in the most critical moment. And
Yeah.
then in a hurry, being a big guy that I am in a small space was not the smartest thing. Another haste example, right? Like
Yeah.
the email.
Yeah.
I was, I look at when I was selling, we were both selling at Splunk, and I walked into the office one day. We were doing a workshop with a bunch of people to try to get them interested in Splunk. I brought lunch with me and so forth. And about halfway there, I was following the person who was walking us in. I see the senior vice president who I've been trying to reach for months. I see him. I see his name on the door. He's on his computer. He's about 20 feet away. And I walked past it and I said, what am I doing? I got a bowl of shrimp in my hand. I got to go introduce myself. I turn around. I walk into his office. I trip and fall. You've got shrimp all over the floor. You've got my briefcase, all my materials, my business cards. I'm on my hands and knees, and I look up at him and I said, hey, George, I'm Gary Harris from Splunk.
Wow.
He looked at me. He didn't even know what to say. He just looked at me like total shock. And he said, okay, nice to meet you. I said, let me clean up my mess. And then I walked over. It took me 3 months to get to meet that guy again. And it was, I don't know if he remembered me, didn't remember me, didn't want to meet me because I was such a klutz, but it took me a long time. And I, could have lost that opportunity to something again because of haste, right?
Wow.
I didn't even know what I was going to say to him, but I was going to introduce myself, which really was of no value to him, right? So here's another, great example. I can give you one more example. This goes back to the Datascope days where because of maybe lack of focus, I missed out on an opportunity for a very large sale. I finally went out to this hospital, knocked on their door, and they said, oh, we've already made the decision. The order's in procurement. There's not much you can do about it. And it was for about $500,000. And I'm just kicking myself in the butt. And I was like, I was being lazy is basically what it was. Yeah. And I wasn't going out and doing the things, you call it sales hygiene. Every career, every type of job has sales hygiene. I wasn't following my own sales hygiene. And normally would tell you I lost that sale, but I did not lose that sale. I went into the director of nursing's office after she refused to meet with me again. I just walked in. I'm sure I've got stalking charges against me all over the country. And I asked her for 2 minutes. She gave me 2 minutes. She said, well, look, here's the deal. I'm going on vacation. The order's in procurement, but I'm going to hold it up. I'm going on vacation tomorrow. If by the time I get back from vacation, you've convinced my nurses that they want to buy your equipment, I will buy it. Unbelievable luck. Talk about luck, right? But you make your luck. I made my luck.
Yep.
I spent, and I'm not exaggerating, morning, noon, and night with every shift of nurses for almost 2 weeks.
Wow.
I slept in my car some days. I bought pizzas. I did in-services at 3:00 in the morning. They knew everything about me by the time we were done. So the day that the director of nursing came back, she calls me up and she says, I don't know what you did, but you're getting the business.
Wow.
Unbelievable. That's how you go back and again, create your own luck, have no fear. And that's how it happened.
Well, and you talked about the word action, and certainly that story is all about the action you took, right? And that's how you overcome. That's how you overcome all adversity. You take massive action, right? You have to be able to do that, or you can fold like a chair, right? And just then you're done, right? You have no way of getting back up again. And the reality is that every one of your stories, as I listen to them, and listen up, listeners, I'm sure you're going to write this down. This is all about massive action. And you overcome failure, you overcome adversity by taking that massive action and learning from that failure. And every story that Gary has told here has the ending of, well, I learned something. I learned to do this differently. What are some of the things that you do differently now to help you not fail? What are some of the tools you use or the mindset you use to make sure, hey, look, I'm not going to get in this mess again. I'm not going to forget a meeting. I'm not going to sprinkle haste. Whatever it is that you used to do, what are the tools or the mindsets that you use now to make sure that you fail less, I should say? Everybody's going to fail, but how do you protect yourself to fail a little bit less?
Well, you mitigate the risk of failure because failure is going to happen no matter what. But
right.
Being prepared, one of the things I tell people is my team is before you meet with that person, go in to meet with that person, have a story ready. You never know. If you're going to be in the facility, you might run into that person. They might come into your meeting. Have a story ready that you're ready to tell and internalize, number one.
Yeah.
So that means just being prepared. Make sure that you've done the necessary research. Make sure that you have the knowledge in the back of your head. And if you can't memorize it, put it on Evernote or some sort of note-taking solution, OneNote, so that you have it there and you can quickly look at it or glance at it. That would be the thing I would say, first and foremost, being prepared and doing the research. The second is slow down. I don't know who it was. I think it was somebody at Splunk that told us, slow down and move fast.
Yeah.
Right. We were going after a large deal, but not all the pieces were coming together and like, whoa. It might have been Steve Gilmore. Slow down. Let's take a step back and then let's move forward. Like make sure that you get the necessary things. Like if you're, for example, you're trying to do a deal, and I'm a big believer in Medic, always have been, learned from Andy White, Jack Napoli, and John McMahon, all those guys, the importance of it. Now, I treat it as a qualification tool and a gut check on myself and a gut check for my team. So when they're giving me the forecast or I'm giving my boss the forecast, do I have these things? And if I don't have a champion, again, I'm sure Anthony said, you don't have a champion, you're not going to get a deal. Right?
That's right.
But making sure that you're looking at all the details associated with that and understanding, what it's going to take to, again, it's preparation to research again. Those are the three things that I'd say will help you reduce or mitigate failure more than anything. The preparation, the slow down, not get too excited, tune back on your EQ, right? Just tune back a little bit, think about it rationally, and then try to get in the other shoes of the person you're trying to reach. Why would Susan Smith, the director of IT or the big data analyst or whatever, why would she want to meet with me? Yeah. What would be the value to her other than, I think I'm a great guy, I think I'm fun to be around. That's not enough. And it has to be something that really matters to her. And again, going back to doing the research, maybe you're talking to other people in the organization, you're understanding more about this person, then you could articulate a message, whether it's email, Slack, text. I don't know too many people with text, but it could be a LinkedIn message, could be a phone call. So again, research, slow down, prep.
I love it. I love that. And for those of you who know my AAA formula, the last A is assess, where you pull back and you look at the options in front of you. And if you are able to do that, you do it with new purpose and new perspective. And you've got to get that perspective. And, failure or adversity gives you that perspective. And once you do that, then you can move forward, right? But you've got to step back first to assess your options. And, that's the whole point, right? You don't ever give in. You never, ever, surrender, right? You're always looking at new ways to get things done. Always new ways, always approach. There's a saying that my mentor, big guy Tony, right? He says, if something doesn't work, what do you do? Well, you try something else. If it doesn't work, what do you do? Well, you try something else. Well, if it doesn't work, what do you do? You try something else. And he goes, well, how many times do you do that? And you say, well, until it works. You never stop. And that's all about failure. That's all about getting up every single time and trying it and trying it over and over again until it works. And
what are you doing in that? process. You're learning. And
Exactly.
my dad had a statement that if you're not learning, you're dead.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You constantly learning. I mean, you're just, whether it's physically or emotionally dead or mentally dead, whatever,
Yeah.
you need to be learning. I mean, to me, I do have a passion for learning. Not necessarily the academic way, but learning
Yeah.
from experiences and so forth, and learning from my peers. So
Yeah.
in the process, you're learning, and
Yeah.
you go back, you assess, what went right, what went wrong. Every meeting, by the way, what went right, what went wrong. And I know we might talk about that later, but
Yeah.
again, the point is you really need to evaluate the conversations that you're having, the meetings that you're having, and so forth.
I agree. I want to pivot into, now you've got years under your belt as a quota carrier. You've transitioned now into sales leadership. That's I love that you did that because you have so much to impart. And I'm sure there's probably some really cool stories in the leadership bucket as far as where you might have had struggles or misses. Can you share some of those recent examples as a leader in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure that anybody that watches this will probably never want to hire me, though, because I keep talking about all my failure. I
don't know about that, but
I've had a few successes in between, but we keep talking about my failures.
that is so true. That's so true.
Failing to lead properly really hurts your company, it hurts your team, and it hurts your career. That's really what it boils down to. And what do I mean by properly? There are all kinds of books. I got it behind me. I have a whole shelf full of sales books, sales leadership books. They all more or less say a lot of the same stuff, just in a different spin, just as a different thought pattern. So, again, it really screws things up for you. So, I talked a little bit earlier about my branding philosophy and how I focus on the brand of my company, the brand of my team, the brand of the individual, and I promote them and do that vehemently, and I do it with vigor, and I do it consistently all the time. But I have made some mistakes as a leader, and I mentioned one earlier where I had made that mistake of not following the directive of our organization, and that did hurt my brand and my team's brand, and but since then have fixed it, which hopefully will improve our brand from that point going forward. I have made a few mistakes. A hiring mistake, for example. This is one where not everybody believes in this, but sometimes you have to go with your gut. Yeah. And we went with a gut with a particular individual to come work, here where I currently work. And there were some red flags. There were some things that popped up, for example, that didn't have a LinkedIn. Thought that was kind of suspicious. Didn't have a profile on LinkedIn. Kept telling me that, I got hacked, and I don't want to trust it to go back on there. But I looked at him. Customers like him, the people that he works with, the internal partners like him. He's a nice guy, but I ignored the flags that were popping up. He missed meetings. We had a sales conference. He showed up and then left, and showed up and left. I wasn't paying attention. That's a failure as a leader because it ended up costing me in the long run. Turns out the person had 2 jobs.
There you go.
And this is not something that an individual contributor watching this video is going to learn from, because I don't want them to go out and get 2 jobs. But he did. And my failure was not paying attention to the red flags and not digging deeper into them.
Yeah.
That was an example. And we've since resolved that. He doesn't work here anymore, and he doesn't work at his other job anymore either. But I also resolved the fact that in the back of my mind, every time I'm interviewing somebody in a hiring mode, I'm looking for those red flags to try to making sure that I'm diligent about it. If I don't get an answer that I want in the hiring process, I will keep digging until I get the answer that I need. So that's a great example as a leader. One of the areas that, I personally have made a mistake recently.
Yeah. I mean, I've done the same thing. We've all done the same thing. And this episode is all about the two of us really kind of being vulnerable. It's like, it's so funny because I know you as, club after club after club, top salesperson, top salesperson, top salesperson, and here we are talking about failure. It's a pretty funny episode because it just goes to show you that everybody fails, and that doesn't matter because, Gary, you're at the top of the mountain of your game. People, you're sought off. You're an industry leader. You are a person that people come to for advice. You're a person that they come to lead them. So I know that of you. I know that you continue to over-deliver, overachieve year after year after year. So to sit here for the last 45 minutes and talk to me about all the failures in your life, that is another way that you give back. I want to kind of, I want to switch that language of, here we are talking about failures, but the idea is what you're doing is you're imparting this knowledge to other people, and not everybody is willing to do that. So kudos to you for signing up for this and telling these stories. They have so much impact, and anybody listening is probably smirking now in their car or wherever they're listening because they know that they've had the same stories, no matter how high they up and how much they're held regard. Everybody has failed, and it's in the failure that the learning exists, and we talked about that at the very beginning. And there's no way you can get to the top of the mountain with some failures because you have to learn, you have to be able to pivot, you have to be able to change your perspective, and all that comes together when you fail. So I just want to make that really clear to our listeners that this is a vulnerable episode because it was done on purpose like that. We wanted to make sure that, we do all kinds of episodes for, operational cadence and champions and metrics and MedPick and all this stuff that we do, and it's all part of the sales operational cadence and excellence. This episode is to really be down and dirty with, the human factor and the fact that, we have got to be true to ourselves, and we've got to be authentic to ourselves and know that, how do we learn from this? And the stories that you told, I can't thank you enough. And being able to be humble and be honest and be authentic, that is the mark of a tier one outstanding, not great. I always say the next one from great is outstanding. You're an outstanding leader because of that. So I thank you for your time here. And I got a few more questions I want to pile through.
Absolutely, but you're making me blush.
No, I think it's important because, when you talk about adversity, and I do this for a living, right? And it's like, you can get down that hole where it's all you talk about. And it's like, okay, lessons learned. But you want to make sure that when you're doing that, you're realizing, well, here's how I learned, and here's what I accomplished because of that. That's important. It's that next step, right? It's, I learned this, I applied that, and by the way, look what happened. So that's the important part, right? So I'm assuming that as a leader now, you have a certain level of empathy for failure, right? Especially when it comes to some big misses, right? People that work under your charge, you probably lead them in a different way than others because of what you went through. So how do you coach? Right. So how do you coach others from their own challenges? If I come to you and I say, "Hey, I'm really struggling with this," or I'm not sure I can get this done. How do you coach those under your charge or anybody around you when they come to you with those challenges? How do you raise them up? What are some of the things you do in the language you use?
Yeah, I mean, from a leader perspective, again, this another book from Jocko Willink called The Economy of Leadership. Talks a lot about rolling up your sleeves and being there with them, showing that you really care, and the humanistic aspect of it. My attitude is always trying is better than doing nothing, right? Doing nothing is not going to do anything for you. So if you're in a position where you feel stuck, you have proverbial writer's block, so to speak, for sales, you're not sure what to do next. Let's get together with some of your peers who've gone through this, and let's ask them. Let's get together with some of my peers and ask them what to do if I can't come up with an answer for you. It's really just taking the step and try something. It may fail, right? We're talking about failure. It may fail. It may not fail. Just picking up the phone sometimes and talking to somebody to try to figure out, hey, what have you done? And by the way, I use my peer network more than a lot of people do. I've called you multiple times in the past. I've called other leaders in the past. I've called ICs in the past just to kind of say, hey, here's my situation.
Yeah.
And I'm not really sure how to deal with it. Any ideas? And I've received some really good quality feedback of, how to approach a situation. But mostly I tell my team, I say, guys, I'm not a lifelong leader. I have been doing this for 20 years. It's only been 7 years that I've been doing this. In fact, I did a skip year where I went back to IC at my current company. And it was 5 years ago that I was doing that. So I understand what you're going through. I understand your frustration of what's being asked of you or whatever. I do. Let's try to figure out a way to get through it. And I bring them back to, hey, we're stuck. Let's get the team together. Egos at the door. Let's talk about it. And let's come up with an action plan. And that usually works.
Yeah.
Not perfect 100% of the time, but it usually works.
Oh, they're involved in their own rescue, right? You got to be involved in your own rescue, right? You've got to, the collaboration is where the value is, right? If I get 5 people in the room, I'm gonna learn from every one of them if I have an open heart and open, if I'm open to that, right? And I'm a learner, right? That's it.
And if they fail, going back to the failure part of it, and this goes with anything in life, and I think I read something similar in your book about it. When you fail, let it hurt. Right? Assess what happened, maybe some of the mistakes. Don't pine on them, but just be honest with yourself of what happened. Is it your fault? Most likely you made a decision that went the wrong way. Sometimes it's out of your control, right? And then understand the why.
Yeah.
And then, at that point, you move on. Say, okay, I'm going to learn from this and try not to do it again. Try not to make the same mistake twice. That's an old saying that I've been using for 30 years. Try not to make the same mistake twice. And guess what? I made the same mistake twice, more than once.
Yeah, me too.
Then let's not make that mistake a third time.
Right.
Or a fourth time. But, just do your best. Do your best about it. And, that's really what it is. It's really trying to bring, I don't want to say it in a hierarchical way, but bring yourself to your people and just open up and be humble, empathetic, and then say, how do we solve this together?
I love that. What advice or takeaways do you want to impart to the listeners about overcoming adversity or the mindset of failure? Just to kind of put a bow around this, Gary, and take us out. What's some final advice?
Well, I've said most of this already. Be humble and be grateful. Be humble, be humanistic, be grateful for what you have. I go back to skill, will, and attitude. Again, I told you I teach you as a coach the mindset. You talk about it a lot, with the servant leadership mindset in your book and in your talks. Others may talk, other things might be growth mindset. And mindset's really, if you look at it from the perspective that failure is not an option, and I don't know what we call that, but failure is not an option mindset. That's the mindset that I always have. There's always a more positive side to this. Let's figure out what it is. But if you're not trying, nothing's going to happen. So get into a mindset, make sure that your attitude and your will is at the highest level possible. You really just have to drive yourself, talk to a friend or talk to a specialist if you need to kind of get your mentality back to having that attitude and that will, because there is no problem other than death and taxes that's not overcomable, right? Yeah. And even taxes is overcomable. I'm not sure that's even a word, but look, the bottom line is if you allow failure to overcome you, it will.
Yeah.
If you don't allow it to, and you just focus on how you're going to win, no matter what comes up against you as an obstacle, you will turn it around.
I agree. That's awesome. That's a great way to end this. And Gary, I can't thank you enough for your time and your vulnerability and honesty, being this authentic and just putting that out there. I mean, the people are going to be listening to this for years and decades, and they're going to get so much out of this talk because it's real. And this is a person that's successful, and the fact that you can sit here and say, well, yeah, I'm successful, but look, this is how I learned, and I went through all of these windy roads to get here. I tell people all the time, it took me 40 years to be an overnight success in business. It's this stuff doesn't happen overnight. And I think that you did a great job. With the listeners to really be vulnerable, and I thank you very much for that, Gary. It's not a lot of people would do that. So thank you for your time. For those listening, another episode of JourneyCast on failure. Maybe failure is an option. That's a great title for this, because it does happen. Everybody's failure is not an option. Well, maybe failure is an option, and what you do with it and what you learn from it is really the key, and that's what measures you as a human being and as a professional. So with that, I'll sign off from this JourneyCast episode, and I hope you took a lot of notes because there was a lot of stuff in there. Gary, thanks so much, brother. I love you, man.
Thank you, Rob. I'm honored to be here.